AI has the potential to be a great equalizer. It can level the playing field for people with different abilities. On episode 71 of Tool Use, we're joined by Julien. Sam leads developer relations and experience at Writer. Today, we're talking about how to use AI to help with executive function. Whether it's helping with the time tax or structuring the unstructured thoughts, Sam has great tips for improving the quality of life with AI. So please enjoy this conversation with Julien.
We're both friends with Sean Wang, Swix. I go way back with him to when he was doing front-end and front-end DevRel stuff and that kind of thing. And he's always my canary in the coal mine of what is cool and what is up and coming and that kind of thing. And he has a lot of depth. And so I had been following, I've been following his work for, 10 years at this point. But when he started Latent Space, that was when I sort of started taking it seriously. Because I actually, ChatGPT came out very close to when my son was born. It was sort of in that same era. And so I was in the fog of being a newborn dad. And so I actually couldn't really do anything with AI for a while. And so I'd been hearing the hype about it. It had been on my radar and stuff. But when Sean kind of started Latent Space and was really digging into it, that's when I was okay, this is for sure a thing. And so I reading and learning about all that. And so I sort of started prepping for what eventually became my job, probably 6 or 8 months beforehand, really digging into everything. And so I didn't come at it from a sort of aha moment of actually using it. It was more of sort of a anthropological, intellectual, this seems like it's going to be a big thing in technology and I should learn about it and get on top of it and that kind of thing. The aha moments came later when I was actually using it and getting involved with it and getting involved with AI engineering and that kind of thing.
Excellent. Yeah, skate to where the puck is going type of approach.
Yeah, exactly. That was really what it was.
And so actually, one thing I'm curious about, new dad, new job, the AI world is just nonstop going. How do you leverage AI to help you stay organized or kind of take that massive to-do list and structure in a way that it's more approachable?
It's made a huge difference. There are a few very specific things I think that it really helps with. One is that I'm a very external processor. I think by either writing or speaking. I have to get thoughts out there in order to do that. And so I think the biggest aha moment for me has been with all of the AI dictation and voice to text, all of that. On my phone, I use an app. It's one of the Whisper. I'm sorry for the developer that I'm blanking on the actual name, but it's one of the Whisper apps on my phone. I have it tagged to my action button on my phone, and so I can just hold it down. And so I'll brain dump something on my mind, and then I also have it then send to my notes app called Drafts, which is a legendary Mac and iOS notes app. So I can basically just brain dump everything in my brain, and then it does a really good job of transcribing it, leaps and bounds better than Siri ever will. Then I can just edit things around and move things around, and because I find that I often come at a problem from reverse, or I'll a lot of times I sort of back my way out of a solution. You know what I mean? I know the solution, but then to explain it to somebody else or to turn it into a set of work items, I have to talk my way through it. And so the AI dictation is really great for that, because I can do that brain dump that's sort of me just meandering through thinking, and then I can just move all the text around to make it logical for somebody else who's reading and consuming it. So that's a really big one. Let's see, as far as to-dos and things like that, I'm trying to think where I still rely very heavily on reminders and that kind of thing, which really doesn't have much to do with AI at this point. But I think for me, a lot of it is just giving more space in my brain, having AI help me with a lot of the rote boilerplate, it's similar with coding, you know what I mean? One of the best things that I think happened this year was Gemini getting into Gmail, because it can take all those, all those emails you get from your insurance company and stuff. That's you have to respond to them in a form email of hi, attached, please find this document for account number, blah, blah, blah. And it takes time. And I would put that stuff off for an absurd amount of time because I didn't want to sit down and do that like tedious work. And so now I can just like make Gemini draft it and then I can just correct it and send it. And so like suddenly I'm responding a lot more to things because I can just like be done with it. So yeah, I think that's a big part of it for me, is just like carving out more space and like mentally uncluttering. And I still use like my analog notebook and things like that. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. I've been using Aqua Voice for my transcriber lately, and I've used to use Super Whisper. I've tried a few of them, and I just happen to settle on this one right now. And it does a wrap at the end of the year, like how much you've been using it. And it started in July, and it saved me over 24 hours apparently, because I'm speaking at 195 words per minute. Some of the audience here might think it's a little too fast, but you know, it is what it is. But just the ability to not only save the time from, you know, the increased bandwidth of speaking rather than typing, but I just find it's more natural. And if I'm trying to be very precise with writing an email, voice transcription doesn't really work that well for me. But when it's a brain dump or prompting an LLM, I just go with voice so commonly now that it's really hard to go back. And I'm glad that more people are finding value in it, because it's just a new modality that we can interface with computers that weren't always there before.
Yeah, I use Super Whisper on my computer, and especially for Slack. It's just especially because Super Whisper, you can use local models. You don't have to send it to the cloud. So like you can have a local Whisper model, so you don't have to worry about privacy and that kind of thing. And so for work Slack, where I'm sending a bazillion messages a day, it's just such a life changer. Like it makes such a difference being able to just like dictate responses to people.
And one thing you mentioned that I can absolutely relate to is when you have those emails you're just putting off for a while. It's one of those unpleasant activities, but having AI to help really can just like quicken the process. Do you have any other examples where AI can help bridge the gap between your intention and your action?
Yeah, I think another really good use case I found is brainstorming, especially with the like thinking modes of the different models, whether it's, you know, what was previously like O1 or O3, or just like, you know, now there's sort of like the thinking toggles, or, you know, any of those like sort of extended inference models and that kind of thing. Like having them just kind of help me think through things, like sort of be a rubber duck of like, I have this problem I'm working through, like, how do you, what should I do here? Like a lot of times I know the solution that I want to get to, but I don't know how to get there. And I'm finding the models do a pretty good job. You know, like they're not perfect, but like they're enough. Like sometimes you don't need a perfect response. You just need a response, you know, like, and for someone like me who's like an external processor, like I can't always like bug my wife about like every random problem under the sun, you know, like she's got enough to worry about. So like having just a model that I can like brain dump and ask it to help me like identify the next actionable step, you know, or like what is a step. I think I also do that a lot just with like mundane things, like with cooking or food prep or like things like that. Like any of that work that is just like cognitively difficult for me, even if it's not like complex. I find that to be super helpful. Just like having a model break down like what are the next like actionable steps and that kind of thing. And of course, I mean, I'm not gonna like blindly follow it. You know, I'm gonna like fact check it and that kind of thing. But like, it's still really helpful to get me unstuck a lot. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anyone unfamiliar, rubber ducking is a practice where you just talk to a rubber duck, and just by speaking a problem out loud, you tend to solve it. And now we have AI that actually can respond to us and help us get to the solution faster. Do you ever do anything like assign a persona, whether it's like be the skeptic, be the devil's advocate? Do you try to have the AI take certain angles as you brainstorm to fill in a gap that way?
Occasionally, I don't do that as often as I should, and I've got some friends who've had a lot of success with that. I have this friend named Manuel who is on the Latent Space Discord and stuff, and he's like I call him like 1000x programmer.
We actually had him on earlier, and yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, he does things with AI coding that I just like did not think any human could come up with. And he gave this like workshop at one of the AI engineer conferences a while back where he talked about some of his techniques, and like he brought up that, you know, AI, like humans in general tend to solve more problems adversarially than just being congenial with each other. And so he does all these things to make the model, like most of the models are sort of trained to be super like amiable and friendly. And so he does these things like he'll tell the model that like his code is the cast of Survivor, and and like make the like take all the functions and like pit them against each other, and like or he'll like say that like everything is in a play, and there's like introduce conflict in the play. Like he does things like that where it's like you're using like human culture to like make the AI like introduce conflict and tension to the AI to make it perform better, which is just like a like big galaxy brain move. I usually get the results I need. Like maybe I'm just doing like dumb enough work that I don't really need that, but like I usually am fine just sort of with the default, because like I'll do most of the cognitive lifting with my own brain. I just need like a something to bounce ideas off of, and like a wall that I can throw things at. The only thing I really have done a lot with sort of more the persona thing is with like editing for like, so I'm working on a book for O'Reilly on graph-based RAG, and I don't use AI a lot for like the actual writing because I still think it's too AI. I want it to be my own words, but it is really helpful for brainstorming and editing and that kind of thing. So I find that like it does a better job if I tell it like, okay, you're a line editor for a publishing company and you need to follow like these like guidelines and these things, like, and I can sort of turn that agent into an editor. And I'll do the same thing with like, like a kind of a system prompt of like, you're like a creative brainstorming type person, and like this is what, but so if I need it to do something really well for a specific task, then I'll kind of assign it that persona. But I think I only do that 25% of the time compared to just sort of the day-to-day stuff,
Yeah, when I first started getting into AI, it was almost like best practice. You have to do it every time. And I rarely do it these days just because the models are so powerful in their default state.
Yeah, it's amazing how even in just the last year, I remember even a year ago, just the level of prompting you would have to do, and just like rounds of tweaking your prompts and that kind of thing. And it's really like this last year, I just feel like it has really taken off to where I can one-shot most things, and if I go the extra mile and give some examples, I can really like one-shot most things.
And it just improves the accessibility and like inclusivity of this technology because you don't have to be a master of what goes in to get the ideal results. You can kind of just wing it. You can just verbal diarrhea into it, and then you tend to get good results out.
Yeah, exactly. You just have like a kind of ever-present brainstorming partner or editor or whatever in your pocket or on your laptop, and it just works really well for that.
One thing you mentioned was how you sometimes say AI to help you tell you what the next step is. How do you kind of conflate that versus having an AI break down the entire plan? Does that kind of become too rigid for you? Do you find just the next step is kind of enough to get you unstuck? Or
I still find, and I don't know, I haven't just determined yet whether this is because of the way my brain works or because of the way models are right now, but I still find for most of the time that AI doesn't judge things of the same importance that I do, or like find insight into the same things that I do. Like I tried really hard this year to build a system around social posts. I wanted to get to a point where I could dump some notes from an AI Daily Brief podcast or a Latent Space podcast or like an article or something like that, and have it give me a good couple of social posts in my voice and that kind of thing. But the problem I was finding was that like it didn't catch the same insights I did when I was doing a podcast or like when I was listening to something or reading something. The things that I judged to be important or insightful, like it wouldn't catch, like it didn't. And so it really struggled to do that. And so I was trying to like change my process to like, okay, first extract the insights based on like these things that I tend to find important. And it was just like so much work. To where it's like it's faster for me to just do this myself. And so I find that that's a very similar thing with like planning, that like it will identify, it's sort of like, have you ever been in a situation where like Google Maps like gives you what is technically the fastest route, but it makes zero sense at all? Like, so in Portland, there's like all these rivers, like there's one big river that's all these bridges, and nobody goes across the bridge unless they have to. Like, it's really dumb to like cross the bridges over and over again because they get so backed up with traffic. And when I first moved to Portland, Google Maps would just have me going back and forth across the bridges because it was technically the shortest distance, but it was completely illogical. It made no sense. And so I find that like AI does that a lot with planning, where it's like, yes, okay, technically this is the next step, but like it's really dumb to do it in that order because there's all these other like factors and contexts that you don't understand. And so I hopefully that will also change over time. But again, I don't know if that's like because of the way my brain works or because of like the way models are. And so I do find it to be a lot more it's a lot more effective for me to give it like to just help me get to sort of like what's the next. It may give me like a broad picture and like 60% of it will be good. But then if I can narrow it down and be like, okay, here's exactly what I'm dealing with, like what's the next step in this process? It's pretty good at that.
Yeah, I have actually encountered similar issues when doing the descriptions for these videos where I used to just give the whole transcript, basic prompt. It was okay. Tried to like prompt engineer for a while. And until I found out, just like focus on the intro, because I always just kind of give a quick summary of what it is. And as soon as it focuses on that, it's fine because it's just more distilled. But if you try to give it the entire thing, it just kind of picks random things. It gets hyper fixated on it. Have you noticed any other tendencies with current state of LLMs that kind of make certain tasks just unacceptable to hand off to AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all comes down to the whole thing of like context engineering right now. That is like such a big challenge. Like the models themselves, I think, like are getting pretty good, but the challenge of giving the right context at the right moment and the right instructions at the right moment is very, very difficult. And so I think what I've been encountering, especially over this last year, as the models have gotten so good, is like there's so much hidden context in your brain that you don't even realize. That's like because you've got all of your sensory perception and all of your life experience and everything that like is affecting how you see a problem and like try to come up with a solution. That like trying to get this like blank slate or like an LLM that has its own biases and things like that, like trying to arrive at a conclusion. So I still find it quite difficult for anything that's like really strategic or creative or things like that, which is fine with me because that's the work I really want to be doing. Like I like we're in such a like hype state, and I continue to find I said this last like in 2024 when I was giving talks and writing articles and stuff, was like I feel like the biggest ROI with AI right now is like the most boring like drudgery stuff, like being able to get rid of that. Like I'm not really looking for, I mean, I would like AI to do things like help with curing cancer and things like that. But as far as like other like crazy, amazing things, like I don't think I think we've actually arrived at a lot of really important ROI that we're just overlooking because there's just a lot of like boring work that AI does really well. And so I'm definitely finding that. So yeah, the biggest problems right now, I think, are context. And that often affects like really complex problems or like creative and strategic things. But as we've seen with coding, like with that landscape is getting, I mean, it's incredible how much has changed there. So it's entirely possible that a year from now or 6 months from now, I'll feel totally different about it, you know?
This flywheel effect has been absolutely insane. It's wonderful to see from the inside, but the distribution of the benefits is definitely not even yet. Like there's a few people really benefiting, and we really got to get it out there more. And I think, solving the context would be helpful. Very big lift. But one thing you just brought up about how like helping reduce the boring, the drudgery. One area that I'm curious if you've thought about or explored at all, do you think AI can help with burnout, where it might be able to get rid of those things that are just so monotonous, so soul crushing, that we're able to be a little more fulfilled, even if it doesn't necessarily like replace jobs or eliminate jobs? It just gets rid of like a certain subset of the task that we don't want to do anymore.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think one of the biggest ROI things for me, I mean, it's related to the voice stuff, but is like AI note taking and that kind of thing. Because, I, like any other PM or whoever, like have to do weekly reports and weekly summaries and, like monthly reporting and like all that stuff, like I have to like keep track of a bunch of stuff. And like kind of going back to like the reminders and to-do lists and all of that stuff, like having a like whatever your AI transcription tool of choice is running in a meeting that can capture things you committed to or things you need to remember or like things like that, like that's been such a game changer. Because for me, that's such a cognitive load of like trying to remember that stuff and then having to like type it all out and all of that. Like instead having like a decent first pass at it through those note-taking tools, like that for me, I mean, it sounds like a small thing, but it's like if you're spending, I mean, at my last role, because my last role was at a publicly traded company, and so I was doing a lot of paperwork and stuff like that, and like it all really adds up. And that was contributing to a lot of my burnout, was just like all the admin work and all the drudgery and stuff. Like I wanted to be working with my team and doing creative work, but I was spending a lot of time doing paperwork, and AI can help with a lot of that now. And I'm definitely noticing that, like it's having those like several hours a week, like maybe an hour a day of that note taking and reporting and admin work taken off my shoulders is like a huge benefit now.
Yeah. And I found the exact same thing. I use Granola personally, but it's not just the time saved from not taking notes. I can be way more present in a call instead of just like trying to like make mental notes. Yeah. I can just like fully talk, forget about things, go on weird tangents, and it'll capture everything. You can query it after. You can hook up a pipeline to bring into your to-do list, as you were mentioning.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those like background processes that most people don't really think about, but it just allows the quality of life, like the quality of a job, to get so much better.
Yeah, 100%. And it's again, it's like, I think the theme that I've found is just like, it's the small, like daily compounding things that really add up and either contribute to having a really successful time or like burning out, like I think we tend to assume that success or burnout is like in all the big swings you take. And like to some extent it is. Like obviously if you're like in some super toxic environment, you're going to burn out, or like if you like do some crazy award-winning thing, you're going to like be successful. But like I think for most people, most of the time, it's like what you do every single day and like the 1% progress you're making every day or 1% detraction is really like what is going to contribute one way or another,
Yeah. And actually on that note, do you have any other micro skills that you would like to share with the audience for things that might not be like a big game changer by themselves, but they do compound over time to help make quality of life better?
I've been sort of on this journey with like AI and everything. And like I was writing about AI for a little while because I think there's this big gap in AI engineering skills right now that a lot of developers need help with and that kind of thing. But some of I think my best work was really in the like anti-hype productivity space. It was sort of like really practical things that are actually really helpful. And so like the whole like 1% compounding thing, that was like something I wrote a while ago. And like identifying the next action and that kind of thing. And so I think it's like looking for opportunities that you can do small experiments on things and like test them out. I think one of the best micro skills I picked up on over the last decade was like this concept that like it's not a failure, it's a test. Like seeing life as sort of like a feedback loop. And if you're sucking at something, it probably is an indication that you're like getting experience and have an opportunity to get better. I literally like just thought about this the other day with something about being a parent, where I was like, I'm really struggling with this, and like that hopefully that means I'm like getting experience, And so I think things like that like AI doesn't actually fundamentally change, about the human experience, where there's like small things that you can do to like improve your life or your career or things like that, that don't necessarily have to be big and dramatic,
And just on the note of the productivity angle, I found a habit that fortunately I had before, was just being curious, where I can open up a chat with Claude, say, I have this one workflow, I would like you to generate a script that helps with it. And just kind of explore what's possible there. I use a Mac and I have Hammer Spoon so I can get access to the API. I have a few different command line tools, just little things that I encountered, which I don't necessarily need to use AI in the actual practice of it, but just AI allowed me to gain the knowledge of how to leverage these existing tools without having to go through the whole learning process normally. So just having the willingness to just ask questions and have these conversations, be curious, get messy, all those fun things. I find it really just ups quality of life, because you get these benefits that you weren't even originally intending to get. You just ask some questions.
Yeah, no, for sure. I've even like I've had a lot of like RSI and hand and wrist issues and things over the years, and like now I use like ChatGPT and Claude to help troubleshoot some of that stuff of like, not that you should like use it for like medical stuff, but like, I'm having pain in this, and I can like snap a picture of like my setup and be like, why is this happening? Like, how can I adjust my setup? And like, It helped me find like a couple of like assistive devices to use and that kind of thing. Like, yeah, even like home repair stuff where it's like, if there, like, I think so much, no matter what the topic is, I think there's so much inertia of just figuring out what the first step is, of like, if I have a home project or a coding project or whatever, where I just like, I have no idea how to start. Like the micro skill is like, just start, just like pick something and do it and get feedback and everything. But sometimes the overwhelming feeling of like, I don't know where to start is like enough to stop. And I found like AI has been very helpful for that, of just like, in writing, we have the phrase of like the shitty first draft. Like you just have to like get something out there. And I think there's also sort of like a parallel, like the shitty first step, like just like do something, even if it's terrible. And so like, you can kind of use AI to just like get you there of like, I have a problem. What's the answer? And usually it's somewhat wrong because you didn't really describe the problem well. And then that is like enough of a catalyst to like get you moving, and get you doing things.
Yeah, break the inertia, like unclog the pipe, just get going.
Yeah.
One area, and I don't have any personal experience in this, but I am curious if you've either heard or like come across it yourself, where now with AI kind of unlocking all these things and giving us all of this, once you break the inertia, all this exposure, is there a risk of getting like decision fatigue or just having too many choices? Is it potentially it could be counterproductive in just unlocking too many aspects that we just kind of get overwhelmed going the other way?
I do think so, because it's like, I feel like I've experienced this on a few levels. Like from a work standpoint, it is tough because now the timelines are a lot more compressed and the possibilities are a lot more extended. And so it's harder, I think, to manage expectations and set boundaries and like be really clear about your capacity and things like that. Because now, an update to the docs that would take a week in prior years now takes like 30 seconds with you know what I mean? Like, with Cursor or, like we use Mintlify and they've got this new agent that's just mind-blowingly good. And like, writing an article or things like that. And so it does make it a little difficult because it's like, okay, I could spend all day just like flooding the internet with like docs and content and things like that. But like, should I? Like, what? Like, is that a good use of my time? Like, I think that's a really good thing to have to think through. So I do think there is like that danger there of like, that. I also think in tandem with that is like an issue that everybody is sort of talking about is like the whole echo chamber phenomenon of like, I think it's also possible to, if you're only talking with these AI products that are basically like incentivized to make you feel good, like it's very easy to get into an echo chamber of like drinking your own Kool-Aid and just like thinking that like you're solving all these problems and kind of go off in a ditch. And like, it's really important that you have like actual, whether it's like customer feedback or friends or, medical professionals or lawyers or whatever, like who can like, give you actual real feedback, that like you can break out of that, like, I think about that a lot with my son, because it's like he's going to grow up in this world. There's actually this huge article in The Economist recently about how AI is affecting childhood and things like that. And that's a big fear, is like how if kids start using AI for studying and chatting and all of that, like, and they're not going to be forced to develop all of these like social skills and like cognitive reasoning and like things like that. So I do think it is, there's that whole, people joke about like the smooth brain syndrome and stuff like that, of like just brain rot and that kind of thing. So I think it's a double-edged sword, there's like all the possibilities and also all the ways that you can sort of like cause your own demise if you're not careful with it,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just last weekend, actually, I was on a panel in Waterloo for Youth Tech Labs, and they kind of put together a thing about AI. Where do we go from here? And there were 6 of us on the panel, and the opinions of AI range from miraculous all the way to like extreme fear. So it was really cool hearing different perspectives, which I think is important. But afterwards, we had breakout sessions with some of the different students, and we were tasked with just kind of like, what are their thoughts? Like, how is AI affecting their life as like a 14 to 18-year-old? And it's really interesting here. Some of them talk about how, because of all the AI generated slop, they're actually less inclined to want to keep scrolling and go online, which is something I didn't anticipate at all. And they were even worried that when you're super interested in a subject, you can just like go down a rabbit hole for infinity. You can learn it so deeply. So they're very bright, but the resilience of having to go through like writing an English essay on a book you find boring and just like grind on a project is something that's where those go to ChatGPT. So it's this weird thing where they're getting like more capable in terms of intellect, but almost like less capable in terms of resilience because it's just this enabling tool.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very important that we have other outlets to teach that and other ways to do that. You know, where you're in the physical world, or you're in the Economist, they were talking about, you know, shifting more emphasis onto in classroom writing and in classroom like debating and lecturing and that kind of thing, so that there is no ChatGPT you can just dump that into. Or, you know, I think about like real world, you know, physical skills. Like I took, when I was in a classic Portland move, I took a bunch of like blacksmithing and welding classes when I moved to Portland, and like that taught me a lot of life lessons about, you know, literal grinding, you know, and like having to like suffer through things. And you know, for those of us who were learning coding before AI, like a lot of your best experience comes from like the worst problems you had to do, you know, like the most boring, annoying problems you had to do in coding. You actually learn the most, you know, because you're like just banging your head against it and trying to like understand it, you know, at a deeper level. So yeah, it is really interesting. But yeah, I do think about, you know, even now, like being able to learn anything. Like even like last night, I like was scrolling TikTok and there was this really cool like Japanese cover of a song, and I was able to just like screenshot it and figure out what song it was. And it led me down this whole rabbit hole of this like Japanese emo band that I had never heard of, and was like digging into the like lyrics and like getting the translations, and like, I mean, it was like incredible, you know. I just like went down this whole rabbit hole of like, I would never have been able to do that, you know, like so like that kind of thing is super fun now, you know. And I think like, yeah, if I had had that in school and the ability to like learn anything at any time for, you know, like go deep into whatever, like, yeah, that's incredible, you know.
It's funny you mentioned the grind process, because I still remember early days of coding. 2 full work days, not solving a problem, showing up to work, leaving frustrated twice in a row. Incredible. Like if Stack Overflow didn't have the answer, you just have to figure it out. But one thing I do want to touch on is when we're doing a lot of writing and AI help, or just like frame it in this way or make it appropriate for this, make it more professional or whatnot. And I kind of worry that because so much of our experience is now online and especially like AI filtered, we're not necessarily developing the skills to like modify our own behavior for social interactions. Do you see AI helping with that or hindering that?
I think right now we're going in a direction that it's hindering it. I think we have to be very proactive about putting things in place to prevent that, because I do think we're like we already, because of the way technology has globalized things, we're sort of going in this like monoculture direction, like and I think I do see that a lot with like writing. You know, if you look at like, it's so easy to identify AI writing at this point, and like everything sort of sounds the same, and it's because it's just basically this like mush of all the writing that's on the internet, you know, and it's sort of like the lowest common denominator. And so like, I do think we really need to be careful to not let that translate into like culture and music and, you know, social interaction and personality types and all of that stuff. Like we can't sort of like let the like training data just like start affecting us in that way, you know. I have some hope that I think there is going to be this swing, and I think we're sort of already seeing it, this sort of like reaction to a lot of the swing into AI, where there's going to be more of a desire for art and poetry and music and language and like analog, you know, records and notebooks and things like that. Like I think there's going to be a strong movement for that, you know, and I think that's really good. I think people are going to really want to double down on like what makes us human and human connection and that kind of thing, you know. Like I think there's something innate like in our evolution that wants that, you know. I can see it with my own child that like, I mean, he doesn't do anything with AI at this point, but like just even with technology, like he could have all the toys around him he could ever wish for and get bored, but I stick him outside and he can run around and like play in leaves and in the grass and stuff. He could be out there for hours, just like moving rocks from one part of the yard to the other, or like, and singing and all of that, like I think there's just something in us that like, I think it's the same. I think that's the same phenomenon of when you open Sora and you have no desire to like scroll endlessly in it. That the folks you were talking to is like, I had that same feeling. Is like, this is weird, and I don't, like I have no desire to do this. Whereas like on TikTok, I'm seeing like other people's perspectives and like a window into their life and stuff, and that's like super fascinating to me. Like, so yeah. Hopefully that's sort of the glass half full approach, I guess, of like humans will overcome that.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful as well. I fully agree that like in real life, our IRL events are going to become more valuable as people crave that interaction. One funny point on your point of the monoculture, I still remember when I was teaching English in Korea, one of the students said LOL, and I was like, what does that mean? They're like, teacher, it's funny. I'm like, no, but what does it stand for? They're like, I have no idea. And internet culture just permeates all other cultures. And I think diversity of culture is extremely important. And I do worry that if AI is our sole interface to the digital world, like that variety goes away. So
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that AI will enable us to, put down the screen, step back, go touch grass, and actually like interact with people while, the background processes are handling our bills and the boring stuff.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Sam, this was a blast. I really enjoyed talking to you. Before we let you go, is there anything you'd like the audience to know?
No, I don't think so. I still do my writing on samjulien.com, and I'm always fascinated to have people reach out and talk to me about any of these topics. But yeah, no, it's a wild ride, and yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation, and yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And actually, before, I got to make sure a lot of our audience would care about your Graph Rag book. Do you have any idea when that's coming out?
Yeah. My wife is always like we were just at a family gathering, for Thanksgiving and everything. And like my brother-in-law was asking me like what I'm up to and stuff. And he was like, and you're writing a book. And I was like, oh yeah, yeah, I'm writing a yeah, no, which is actually like a dream come true. Now, I'm co-authoring a book with my friend Anthony Alcaraz, who's a AI person. I don't even know what his title is, but he's just an AI guru. I don't know, in Paris. But we're writing a book called Agentic Graph Rag, and it's basically a book for O'Reilly on how graphs can influence all the different parts of agent architecture. It's a really interesting topic, and so we're co-authoring it, and we're finishing the manuscript sometime in the first quarter of 2026, and so it should be published sometime in the summer of 2026. And when we're putting early release chapters on, and so I think there's a chapter on there that goes over the agent architecture, and then an early chapter on agentic memory and that kind of thing. So yeah, graph-based RAG is sort of like, it's in some ways it's like a hot topic, and in other ways it's not. But like, for example, most of the AI memory tools now, like Zep and Cogni and Mem0 and all of those things, those are all graph-based. And so there's some really, really interesting stuff happening with graph-based RAG and agents and that kind of thing. And so just a really interesting topic to write about. So definitely check it out. It's at O'Reilly.com if you look for it.
Yeah, I'll make sure to link it down below, and hopefully get to have you back on when it's out so we can talk more in depth about that.
Yeah, definitely. Love to talk more about that.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Sam Julien. Sam and I were joking after we finished recording the episode how nice it was to not talk about work and be able to just explore the fun parts of AI, the things that actually improve quality of life. You don't necessarily have to take every single tool that's out there or try to be hyper productive all the time. You can find the aspects of your life that add friction, add drudgery, or just boring, and see if AI can help with that. If you just have a little chat with Claude or ChatGPT or whatever your model of choice is, and just say, this is the part of my day that I hate the most. How can I make it better? You'll probably find something. And if you work on these micro skills, as Sam calls them, you're able to compound over time and actually get to a spot that you probably didn't think was possible to begin with. You don't have to necessarily adhere to the structure of modern society, where you can just be yourself and have AI be the translation layer. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next week.